Intellectual Gentlemen's Club.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the IGC podcast. I'm Jason Abbott, your host once again. I want to thank everybody once again for subscribing and sharing and conversing with us on the internet and wherever you may find us through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, directly on the website. I really enjoy everybody's comments. If you guys want to send me anything, you can shoot me an email at igc@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter at IGCcast, and we're on Facebook /Intellectual Gentlemen's Club. Our website is intellectualgentlemensclub.com. That's the main hub where we have all the podcasts, all the crew that's been on the show for almost the last year here we've been going. And so check us out there. We have a support page on the website. It has a few affiliate sponsors on there. Amazon.com, Audible.com, if you're listening to any audiobooks, and Onnit.com, which is a total human optimization company. They sell supplements, health foods, fitness equipment. Really, it's a site designed to 2.0 yourself in any way possible. So give those guys some love, and we get a little bit of a cut on that, and it helps to pay the bills. So today I'm going to introduce our co-host. You may remember him if you're an avid listener. He was our guest on episode 3, Alexander Ward. How you doing, Alex?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me back on again.
Hey, no problem. Alexander is a visual artist and filmmaker. You may have seen him on the YouTube segments with the Psychedelic Dialogues. He's also a pretty great artist. He released a piece of artwork, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or so. It's called Alice Ascends. It's actually something I've been wanting to get my hands on, and it was a great piece of art. So check that out. There's a YouTube video on fast motion and how that was done through his computer. So that was pretty cool. Our guest today is Simon G. Powell. He is a musician, a filmmaker, an author. Some of his books are The Psilocybin Solution and Darwin's Unfinished Business. He does have a book that will be out within the year called Magic Mushroom Explorer, Psilocybin and the Awakening Earth. Did I got that right, Simon?
Yeah.
Okay,
that sounds
great.
Familiar.
All right. And he's a psychonaut like all of us. Both these guys are much more advanced than my experiences, so I'd like to dive into that a little bit. But welcome to the show, gentlemen. Appreciate you being on.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, Simon, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on who you are if someone's not versed and haven't heard an interview with you before?
Oh God, who am I?
Who are you? Who is Simon G. Powell?
I don't see myself as an intellectual gentleman. That's for sure.
Well, that's
working class. I am, and somewhat educated. So somewhat educated working class club is what I'm part of, I suppose.
Yeah, we have a plethora of people on here. It's more of a sarcastic term, but everybody, I believe, is an intellectual and a gentleman to some degree. So
I try my best. I have been researching in the British Library recently for another book. But yeah, I suppose I'm chiefly a writer with an interest in psilocybin mushrooms, altered states of consciousness, and particularly the biosphere and how we understand life on Earth and what the significance we give to life on Earth and the evolution of life to the point of consciousness and all these kind of things. So I'm an amateur philosopher, maybe you could call me. I don't know.
Very cool. So how did you get started? Like, when did this type of path reveal itself to you, if you would?
Oh, long time ago.
In a galaxy far, far away?
Yeah, well, in a century far away, in the last century. It goes back a long while. I've actually, the new book that comes out in 1 year's time, this Magic Mushroom Explorer, that kind of details amongst other things, it details my personal voyage, if you could call it that. And it goes back ages. I mean, I first took psilocybin in, it's about 1984, 1985.
This was before the prohibition as well, right? Of the mushroom.
Yes, at that time, exactly. At that time, the fresh indigenous mushroom to the British shores was legal to pick and possess and consume. And then I went on to do. I got interested in the psilocybin experience, and I did a degree in psychology. That was as far as my education went. And after I graduated, I discovered Terence McKenna, and then I went through this period I call my mushroom fever period. That was back in 1992, and that set the course of my life. And 22 years on from that, I'm still interested in psilocybin. I still write about psilocybin, and my psilocybin experiences have influenced all the creative stuff I do. So it's yeah, that's basically.
Alex,
I'm still trying to work out what it's all about, really.
Right.
I think we all are. So,
Alex, would you say that's a fair understanding of how you got involved in the world of the conscious mind, or however you want to call it?
It's funny, like when you travel around enough, working with ayahuasca or psilocybin, for that instance, interacting with the people involved in it, they all have a very similar story to tell, where there's some kind of disconnect with the regular kind of culture they live in, and they're seeking some kind of further meaning to it all, and they sort of uncover psychedelics in that process, and that really just sets the path of it. That was certainly the way for me. I studied in animation. I worked in the animation industry. I ended up in China just working the grind up there, like really heavy work hours, and that sort of really burnt me out, and I needed to find some kind of extra meaning to put towards my artwork. And that's where I found this dangerous Simon Powell, who had all these psilocybin mushrooms. He's like, hey, try this. And
Public enemy number one.
But no, we went out for like hikes in nature, picking the mushroom in its native environment, and then proceeding to take him around the campfire. And I mean, that was just a really profound experience for me. And it kind of led towards me seeking these things in a path further, go into the jungle, experiment with ayahuasca for just about, I think it's been 2 years now. And it's something that's going to be definitely a part of my life, and it's given my artwork something to it's not really affected the way I produce my artwork, but it's given it a meaning now, a certain theme that I can work towards, which is this kind of reverence to nature and all of this good stuff. So
Gotcha. I don't know if you guys have seen The Matrix, but kind of what you're describing to me, and something I felt in my own life, is what was portrayed in the movie a bit. You have the main character, Neo. He's, a hacker or something like that, and constantly searching for something. He knows that there's something wrong with the world, that disconnect like you're talking about, and it leads him to, Morpheus and having this decision to take the red pill or the blue pill. And the three of us, I believe, chose that red pill and decided not to kind of, bury all that, those feelings that we have as far as, how the world operates and things of that nature.
That idea is in vogue. At that time, after The Matrix, there was also The Truman Show. There were quite a lot of movies around that time. They all had the same sort of metaphysical premise, that there was some bigger picture that was out there that we were disconnected from, but that we could become wise to. And I think it's always an attractive metaphysical idea. And I think a lot of people feel that you can. I think I said it in my Manna film, that modern life, or the values of modern life, don't really lead anywhere at the end of the day. There's an obsession with celebrity and getting rich and all this kind of stuff, and you think how splendid the universe is, and the power of the universe to create life and conscious nervous systems. One suspects there's something going on, and I think the use of the exploration of psychedelics is part of that quest to understand what the hell is going on. What are we part of? So yeah, I think it's natural. It's natural to be inquisitive and to explore altered states of consciousness, and those states of consciousness where you do feel more connected to some larger pattern of meaning.
There's something that you said once that I've always really liked about what it is about the change of perception you undergo with the psychedelics such as psilocybin. And that is trying to find the words you use, the shortening of distance between you and what you're observing in the outside world.
Yeah,
So you can have that connection to sort of the greater world outside.
yeah. I've often had that. I've been with you before, and we've been out trekking under the influence of psilocybin, and I'm always astonished at how when you with psilocybernetic or psychedelic perception that there seems to be the distance between you and what you're observing seems to diminish. So there's no. It's like in our normal consciousness. There's all this stuff going on in the mind, things we're worried about, and mechanical activity, and it stops us being true. McKenna used to go on a lot about being in the moment.
Right.
And there's lots of books about being in the moment and that sort of slightly higher state of consciousness where you feel the actual living moment. And I think psychedelics like psilocybin, they put you even more in the moment. And so there's the distance between you and your environment and what you're perceiving is so diminished that you become more at one with it. It's quite an astonishing thing.
Yeah. It certainly gets rid of all those extra layers that seem to get piled onto you whenever you're living in regular human culture. It just sort of wipes that clean.
Yeah, I think that one of the misconceptions by the general public is if you haven't tried a psychedelic or an entheogen or anything like that, in my personal experience, prior to me trying any of those substances, I really did not understand. I always looked at it as a lower state of consciousness where somebody was just, taking it to get fucked up or whatever. And then that is the case at sometimes. But there's use and there's abuse of, any kind of drug or medicine, however you want to call it.
Sure.
And there's a fine line to walk. There's a fine line to walk there. So, but since I've tried these different substances, each one of them have been beneficial in my life, whether you're talking about MDMA, psilocybin. Recently, I had my first ayahuasca
Yes, I heard about
trip.
that.
Yeah, and Alexander, when we talked to you about that early in the podcast, you were one of the influential people who got that kind of in my head, like, well, maybe there is something to this, And then we had Nick Gabriel on, and he talked about a little bit about his experience, and we cover these things a lot. So, if you're a regular listener to the IGC, you know that we don't shy away from the psychedelic dialogues, as we would say. But they have given me these profound experiences where it removes what you're saying is it removes this middle ground to where we usually walk. We always know that we're connected with some type of higher intelligence, whether you call it God or the source or Allah, whatever you want to call it. I do believe that there is an underlying intelligence or consciousness to everything that exists. And when I'm on some of these substances, and it's a rarity for me, but when I do have the chance to partake, it immediately takes out all the bullshit and garbage that's involved in normal life, and it puts me in direct contact to something that could be argued is me at a deeper level. But what I feel when I'm on those substances is I'm being connected to something greater.
Yeah, I'd call that a greater wisdom, and I call it natural intelligence.
Okay,
and that's what the main message I've got, and I think we're all kind of searching for that. But I'd go along wholeheartily with what you say. That there is a larger wisdom that one can access, and I think that's the ultimate reason why people feel that when they take ayahuasca or psilocybin. But you're right; it's all about how you approach these substances is the most important thing, and it all boils down to what your intention is. And of course, some people, they just want to get out of it and have it like as a party drug, and it's probably not really suitable for that. But
the other way is the set and setting was the other way.
Well, yeah, because that was established right from the get-go in the
Leary, right?
Leary, before he left Harvard and went on his messianic trip. They established that set and setting was very important, and set refers to your mindset. So if you're educated about these substances and you know their history and what they're capable of doing, you can approach them with more sort of humility and it can be more tutorial, I think. So it's really about one's intention. I think that's the value of making films and writing books and conveying the serious, if you like, or the therapeutic side of psychedelics. That's why it's important.
Very cool.
Yeah,
so the Psilocybin Solution, your book that you wrote, was that your first publication?
First publication. I'd self-published book. Yeah, it was my first book, first properly published book. Yeah.
Okay, and does that go into pretty much kind of what we're talking about? I haven't had a chance to read it, but what do you cover in the book, basically?
Oh, a lot of things. It goes into the modern history of. It's about psilocybin, so it goes into the history of psilocybin, how it was used in Mexico, how it was discovered by Gordon Wasson, and what Gordon Wasson wrote about it in his famous Life magazine article, and then how Leary got turned on, as it were, by mushrooms in 1960, and then the Harvard psilocybin project, and then how that got closed down, and the Good Friday experiment, and then how the mushroom sort of disappeared and LSD took over, and then how McKenna took up the reins again, and then it goes into there's a whole chapter on neurochemistry and synapses and the chemical environment within the brain, and how psilocybin works on neurons and synapses, and I come up with an information. Well, it goes into all sorts of things.
But traditionally, with psilocybin, these mushrooms have been used for millennia at this point, haven't they?
Yeah,
there's evidence back in the Aztecs and even prior to that, I imagine, correct?
Yeah, the Maya and the Aztecs going right back thousands of years. Yeah, they have a rich, long and illustrious history.
I wonder.
But there's no recorded history of it having any kind of cultural history in England. Is that right?
Yeah, well, there's no hard evidence. People always ask.
No.
There's this romantic idea that the Druids knew about them and the people that built Stonehenge knew about them and used them in secret and stuff. But there's no hard evidence that I know of, and I don't think that matters. I think they're a thing that, for me, the indigenous. I mean, there are hundreds of species of psilocybin mushrooms across the globe, and they keep on discovering new ones. I think their time is now, because we're at the point in human history where we need them more than ever, because of our relationship with the biosphere is so fouled up that these parts of the biosphere, these organisms like the psilocybin mushroom and the ayahuasca vine in the Amazon and stuff, they're more important now than they've ever been, because we're so disconnected from nature. So I don't know of any better way of reconnecting us with nature than the use of psilocybin and ayahuasca. Yeah. It's a sort of a radical, drastic means of stimulating biophilia, as I always term it, but that's their function and role. So the historical use is interesting, but I really think the time of these substances is now.
Sure. You said, I think you've mentioned before, that this is kind of another example of some form of natural intelligence, the fact that the biosphere has generated these devices at this certain time where they're most useful. There's a kind of implications of that happening. It's quite profound.
I see it as a synchronicity. It's a synchronistic. The things you need are there. Yeah.
How do you think that we could overcome the gigantic blue pill, as you would say, that there are in people who are out there who do not want to see any type of head expanding medicines be brought to mainstream? I know psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, they're all scheduled materials, in the United States. I believe they are in the UK as well, and other places throughout the globe, right?
The most dangerous chemical known to man. That's what it signifies.
Right. What do you think? How do you think the way could be responsibly to integrate that into our society? I mean, personally, I'd like to see almost like a shamanic center that you could go to, see a physician or a doctor, or however you want to call them, a facilitator, and have a safe setting you could get them at and use them there. But how warm do you think people would come to that?
that sounds far too civilized for for the people that run the world to ever take up something like that. But yeah, I mean, if you look at there's this new, well, they call it a new wave of psychedelic science. There's certainly there's more psychedelic research going on now than there has been for ages. There was recently a study with LSD. I think it's the first time since the 70s there's been an official scientific study with LSD used in a therapeutic setting. But if you look at the experiments that have been done over the last 5-10 years with psilocybin at Johns Hopkins and MAPS and Hefter
and all that,
they've been getting good results in various therapeutic situations, but it's quite controlled in that there's a sitter there, there's a therapist there, and they pay this setting. Mm-hmm. It's very, very important, and because it's a way of optimizing the kind of experience. So
without that, though, things can go very dark at sometimes. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah, it's very important that setting they're very powerful substances. So you should always take care when you take. McKenna said you should take them. You unplug all your phones and take them in a safe, your place where you live and that kind of thing. But yeah, getting back to the scientific thing, and they're getting good results, and they pay a lot of attention to setting. I've often said in interviews when I'm asked about this kind of thing, I'd like to see a sort of I always call it a revitalization center. I don't know what else to call it, but some place where you go where they facilitate these experiences, and that would be a civilized thing to do.
Would that be something
that would be a cool thing? You could go to this. You could book in one of these places, and
like a spa or something, right?
Yeah, a revitalization center, and where it's all geared up to facilitate a rewarding experience with say psilocybin. It's not too. That's feasible.
The psilocybin spa.
Well, whatever. I don't know, something along those lines.
Right.
And I also think I'd like to see a licensed trade in psilocybin mushroom growing equipment.
Well, I think that's fairly easy to come by. I've done some research on how it would be to grow, and I find it seems to be it would be very much easier even than marijuana to grow. If you're looking to.
There's you can buy spore samples anywhere.
Yeah, the spores are legal, but the mushrooms themselves are not.
You can buy the growth media. So I can see that there could be a license trade in that. Just like people could grow their own cannabis or whatever, people should be able to grow their own mushrooms.
Right.
But it needs to be done in an informed way. So when you buy a mushroom growing kit or whatever, you're provided with information. As much. That's the only remit really of the state. Is to educate and inform citizens. They don't have to be a nanny. All they need to do regarding adults is inform them about this is what this substance does, this is the history of it, this is what you should, the same as when you go and buy some medication at the pharmacy or drugstore. There's information, there's a leaflet inside the packet that tells you about who shouldn't take it, who should be wary of taking it, and so you can do it in an informed way.
Didn't you produce one of these back in the 80s? You had like a little pamphlet.
No, that was when the mushroom was being traded.
Right. Yeah.
Between 2003 and 2005. Yeah, I produced, because no information was being given out to consumers. I produced a booklet, but they didn't want to distribute it because it would then look like they were selling the mushrooms to be consumed, which they were.
I see.
So
they weren't allowed to do this.
Was psilocybin ever available legally in the UK?
Well, the indigenous mushroom was legal to pick and possess, and it had been there was a tradition of a cultural subculture of psilocybin use. And then in from about 2003 to 2005, a trade in tropical psilocybin mushrooms sprung up, and it spread throughout the country. You could buy them in Oxford Street and stuff. And it went on for about 2 years, and without, as far as I know, without any serious negative without a serious negative impact. And then they got because some people in the government didn't like this because they're frightened of all that. I don't know, maybe seeing people wearing funny hats or something, selling mushrooms. They prohibited the mushroom in 2005. And I actually fought it. There's a thing in my book. There's a whole chapter on I lobbied Parliament and produced this document which I sent to everyone because I didn't want as well as outlawing these tropical varieties that they were selling in market stalls. They also outlawed the indigenous Liberty cap, which rubbed me up the wrong way, because I'd for years I'd been going out to the Lake District and Snowdonia and places like that, picking the mushroom without having to look over my shoulder. But then as soon as they prohibited the possession of all psilocybin mushrooms, it was just, I thought it was it'd never been done before to actually outlaw a naturally occurring British organism. It's insane, but they did it anyway.
Do you think that has any relation to the U.S. drug policy and basically spreading their policy to the world? Because the UN kind of adopted that, and I don't know if that had anything to do with. There's many countries, I believe, that did have certain
legislation.
Yeah, the legislation was passed, and it basically kind of big dick America kind of.
Did you do it before us?
This is what we're going to be doing. You know what? I'm not sure.
I know in the UK it all goes back to the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971, but that was built on something from the late 60s, which was an international. There are people out there who know all about this, that study the whole drug fiasco and how it all went downhill. There was some kind of international psychotropic drug legislation or whatever that most countries backed. But, it's not working. We know that you can't, it's just absurd, they're not, let's get back to psilocybin. Psilocybin is currently classified in the UK as Class A, in America as Schedule 1, which means it's considered to be one of the most dangerous substances
with no medicinal properties, right?
Worse than cyanide, worse than weapons grade plutonium or whatever. The most dangerous thing, and with no medical utility or whatever. But there have been papers published in the last 5-10 years showing the therapeutic efficacy of psilocybin. So it's bollocks to say that it's got no therapeutic, that it's dangerous and it's got no therapeutic utility. It's absurd. It would be that psilocybin is classified alongside heroin and crack cocaine.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Well, even cocaine is a Schedule 2 in the U.S.
Right.
So that puts things a little bit in perspective when you have marijuana at Schedule 1 with no medicinal properties, and half of our states have adopted medicinal marijuana is legalized, and 2 of our states in Washington and Colorado have outright legalized recreational use. So, yeah. The feds have got to say something in the U.S. at least at some point to address this, because it is just, the hypocrisy is just overwhelming with what the people want and voting into the states and at the federal level. So yeah. I'm looking at Google right now, or Wikipedia rather. It looks like there was a single convention on narcotic drugs in 1961. Yeah. And psychotropic substances in 1971. And then there was a United Nations Convention against narcotic drugs in 1988. So I think the ball really was rolling back then. But I think it was 1972 that Nixon announced the so-called war on drugs, which I like to call a war on drug users or a war on consciousness.
Well, exactly. It's not, the whole language thing is skewed. It's not a war. You can't have a war on substances that don't have a will or volition. You can't fighting a war on chemical substances is like fighting a war on sand or rock. You can't. It's a war. It's a war on the people that use these substances, myself included. So it's
all of us.
It's a civil war, and it's ridiculous. It's it's not. It should be. All drug use should be decriminalized instantly. That's a no-brainer. It's not a criminal. There's no crime.
Yeah.
You're not. But most drug use is not. About 90% of world drug use, or the use of illegal drugs, is non-problematic. And it's not. There's no crime. People don't. It's not a criminal issue. It's been corrupted into a criminal issue.
Yeah,
it's not. You're not a criminal, even if you're a blooming heroin addict. You're not a criminal. You've got a medical problem.
It's a health issue, right?
Yeah, I believe it does boil down to a health issue. And when you look at the statistics, people like to point out that drugs produce crime. And if you made these drugs accessible, if you have a heroin junkie is going to find its heroin off the street or wherever it can find it. I think if you would make these substances legalized and you provided a safe, because you never know what you're getting in. If you're getting anything off the street, even pot, people be like, oh, is it laced? Well, it's not really cost efficient to lace pot, by the way, people. But if you had a responsible and ethical way of providing these substances to people, you wouldn't have the crime, because people are stealing money to get the drugs. If you can get the drugs, then you're not going to have that same type of crime. Look at Portugal, like you're talking about. There's a low addiction rate, and people do look at it largely as a mental health issue. And there's, if people want to use drugs, I mean, there's all different reasons where you can do that. A drug is a medicine is a drug, whatever. There's fine lines that, to all these substances, but there's an underlying reason though why people are using substances. In my journeys with psychedelics, I use them to kind of expand my mind. If I'm using marijuana, I use it to relax. Okay, these are things I like to do. But if people are using heroin, if people are addicted to cocaine, or if people are addicted to these heavy drugs, look at our pill problem in the United States, for God's sakes. Well, there's a reason why people are doing this, which we have to address.
Yeah. Well, there are more people are killed in America from prescription drugs than heroin and cocaine
put together.
Combined,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've actually gone into that in the new book.
But you don't hear about that on the mainstream news. You want to hear about how people are addicted to crack and heroin and meth.
Things are changing they are changing in the right way, but it's a very, very slow process.
Yeah, I know with pills, I personally know people who would fly across the country to get Oxycontin because they couldn't get any more from their original doctor where they were at. So they had two doctors at different parts of the country who weren't talking to each other, who didn't know that they were on, a certain dose of such and such, double, triple dosing. That's a problem. I mean, the whole world is connected to the fucking internet, but two doctors can't see what one person is being prescribed. How is that even possible? It's almost like it's designed to fail like that, just so people can make more money.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie The House I Live In?
No, I haven't.
It's a drug thing about the drug war and the prison, the prison industry and all kind. It's a very good film about
everything's interlaced. A friend of mine, he's retired from. He was a prison guard in I believe it was the state of Kentucky, and he was just he just admitted to me basically that he just saw it was like an open door of people coming in for these small minor drug offenses that would shape these people to come out as major criminals.
Yeah.
So,
isn't there a situation with that where they go into the law courts and they're given a kind of choice? They either plead guilty to, possessing the drugs, or if they plead not guilty, they're going to slap them with 4 years of imprisonment. So do they choose 3 months and be imprisoned for that, or do they try and fight it and go down for like 4 years?
Yeah, I doubt it's as little as 3 months. I think.
Oh yeah.
Our prisons in the United States. I'm not sure about the UK. I'm not well versed about that. But in the US, prisons are privatized, and it's a money making operation. Which,
this is what the House I Live In was about. It goes into all that the whole prison industry. It's a very lucrative. And then there's all the judges.
Is what it is.
There's all the judges and the lawyers and everything. The whole thing is a big criminal demonizing drug users and criminalizing them and oppressing them is a very lucrative industry. And like I say, it's ridiculous because it's not a criminal issue; it's a health issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. And I don't have all the solutions for everything. I know.
It's a shame when it comes to ayahuasca and psilocybin because it just muddies the whole field.
Sure, it
'cause it's
leaves
such
a sour taste in everybody's mouth when you say drug. And Alex, when we talked about ayahuasca when you were on previously, you like to call it a medicine, and even my facilitator,
Without a
when I
doubt,
took
yeah.
ayahuasca, I referred to it as a medicine, and so did he, and all the people who were there who were taking it were as well. And I understand now why it's called a medicine. I really didn't grasp the concept because I thought I was going to go in for like a psychedelic trip, and that's not what I got. What I got was a healing overhaul. I mean, I went through some deep, deep issues. I re-experienced my whole father's death with the suicide, the funeral, the day, the cops, everything. And, I cried for hours like a little baby. And, I dealt with family issues and all kinds of other things. And I've talked in detail to people who are close to me. But I feel like I have largely been healed on a lot of things. My father's death is something that's haunted me for many, many years. And we just had an anniversary of his death and the suicide and his birthday kind of all wrapped up in the same month in January. And it went by and it didn't really affect me really at all. I gave thought to it, but I feel almost free of it. And that's why I can only recommend that you would take this in a therapeutic setting. It's not a party drug, nor is psilocybin, in my opinion. I can't speak for LSD. That's not something I haven't tried, but these are healing substances, and I just want people to know that you can have these epiphanies and breakthroughs, and it's something incredible that I'll never forget.
Yeah, that's an I'm glad that's impressive what you said. Well,
Yeah,
you hear it from a lot of people. They talk about the ayahuasca. The mushroom I call a spiritual food. That's one of my terms I call it.
Nice.
But this medicine, this therapeutic, the ability of these substances to help to bring out information from the unconscious and to help to integrate the psyche and all these sort of disjointed bits of information and all these traumas and all this kind of thing. And that's why they're looking into using these substances in a therapeutic setting. That therapeutic potential does need to. It's there. It's a definite. You can't. It's an absolute. It's a real thing. So it's good to hear people talking about it.
Yeah, and when we talked with MAPS, Brad Bursch from MAPS, the one thing that he said that you can do to kind of bring light is to talk about it openly. Talk about it around dinner tables. Talk about it with, your friends and your family. And some people are very standoffish to it. And I've learned to, when I start getting those crazy looks and these eyes glaze over and the eyes start crossing, deer in the headlights looks, you have to back off a little bit because you're only going to, incite different emotions that you don't want to. So,
it's good. It's good to be wary, but on the other hand, it's good to, if you're speaking the truth, if you're talking about your psilocybin experiences, profound psilocybin experiences or profound ayahuasca experiences, if you stick with the truth, I think people can kind of tell.
Well, in my life, I know I try to just live my life as as I do, and I try not to preach so much. Like, obviously, I have the podcast. If you want to listen to it, that's fine, but I don't force it down anybody's throat. So I live my life the way that I want to live, and if people look at me as an inspiration or somebody who could be trusted, then that's great. But I try not to be like a douchebag out there just pumping up, different ways to do things and how to get chemicals in your body. That's not what it's about.
I think once your friends and family see those positive changes in you that have come about through an ayahuasca experience, then instead of you just talking about it, they're going to notice that and see that there is something to these medicines. And that's certainly been the case for me. I haven't needed to talk about how much of a healing amazement this is. It's just they can see the evidence in that themselves. So I think that's really the strength of these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words and all that, right?
Indeed. Yeah.
So let's jump around a little bit. Simon, why don't you talk to us about your book with Darwin's Unfinished Business? What did you cover in that book? I mean, obviously, we're talking about Charles Darwin and evolutionary theory, I would presume, right?
Yeah, well, it's as I said in the new book that's coming out, Magic Mushroom Explorer, I talk about the useful, what I've learned from over 20 years of psilocybin, independent psilocybin research, And I think that the most important thing I got out of all that was this, what I call the natural intelligence paradigm. And that's the natural intelligence paradigm is what Darwin's Unfinished Business is. Well, the subtitle of the book is the self-organizing intelligence of nature. So, I make the case that the evolution of life, that life has intelligent characteristics. I think it's an unconscious intelligence that's becoming conscious through human consciousness, for example. But the important thing is it's really a reinterpretation of life on Earth. How I think it's a different way of looking at life and the evolution of life. And I make the case that life is an ongoing, active intelligence, or a wisdom, if you like. And it sits well, I think, with. Are you familiar with the bio-mimicry movement? Have you heard of the bio-mimicry?
Probably something that I've heard about, but why don't you explain a little bit?
Well, the biomimicry, in simple terms, the biomimicry movement it's a way. It's looking for engineering solutions by looking at living organisms. So, say for example, engineers wanted to create a glue, a very strong glue that worked under the water. You can look at barnacles and mollusks and see how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like termite mounds are able to. Termite mounds are amazingly air conditioned without using electricity.
Mm-hmm.
So the biomimicry people look at that, and they look at I think it's the lotus plant that the leaves are self-cleaning. So the biomimicry movement is about mimicking biomimicry, mimicking life, looking at life for solutions to engineering problems. And so their working definition of the Janine Benyus, who founded or spearheaded the biomimicry movement, she calls it the conscious emulation of nature's genius. So this natural intelligence paradigm that I promote with all my work at the moment it's the idea that evolving life is not dumb and mindless, but actually a kind of wisdom.
Sure, I can see that.
The wisdom is held in the reason I think this paradigm needs to be listened to and have a good shot, as it were, is because at the moment we're alienated from the rest of the web of life, because we don't see the web of life as being a kind of intelligence, and we cocooned ourselves away. We think we can do anything, and we're paying. We got climate change is really hitting home now, and undoubtedly human culture, what we do, our use of fossil fuels and such, our technology, we're not in harmony with the way the rest of life kind of works, and the wisdom that life has learned over millions and millions and millions of years. This hard-won wisdom that's in the actual biology of organisms and the way they behave and the way they all link up, and they form all these cycles and loops, and it leads to the homeostasis of the biosphere, that it maintains conditions conducive to health and such. We're so disconnected and alienated from that we do need. I think it's partly because of how we view evolution and how we view life.
Well, I think that if you look at the average American and how they live, and probably largely in the UK as well, look at the houses that we live in. It's totally, you want nature completely outside. You don't want any of that in there. All you want is a little bit of fresh air, maybe. You keep the windows open during the day, but the houses are made of brick. They're made of stone. We have drywall everywhere and dead wood everywhere. That metal that facilitates our air that circulates through the house.
Yeah, well, it's not. I can see in the future if this biomimicry, that kind of ethos spreads, and we realize that we need to get more in tune with nature, I can imagine that our technology will become more organic. And because at the moment, if you look at a city from up above, from an aircraft or whatever, it doesn't look like it's part of a forest or whatever. It doesn't look like part of the everything else on the biosphere. So I can
Well,
imagine a time.
I've heard Joe Rogan in one of his bits. He calls it mold on the sandwich bread. If there was an alien intelligence that came to the Earth and looked down, they would look at these cities like it was a disease
Yeah,
compared to the
like
rest of the planet.
yeah, or like concrete scab or something. So it's I can imagine a time will come when I think the way the human race becoming more in tune with the rest of the web of life and living in more harmoniously with the rest of, and strengthening and regenerating the biosphere, that I can imagine more organic looking cities, more organic architecture and green roofs and things. There's all this concrete space with nothing growing on it. If you have green roofs and greenery growing on all these currently dead surfaces, I mean, it would increase biodiversity. It will look nice. It will absorb carbon. It will make fresh oxygen. But we're a long way away from that at the moment because we're going it alone. We're like the prodigal son. One day we'll come back to the biosphere and realize that there's great wisdom in the web of life, and it's high time we acknowledge that and sought to learn. This is why I'm interested in the mushroom, because I think it opens you up to that bias. The eco-psychological impact of psilocybin and ayahuasca that's a very important aspect of the experience. It can make people come away from people who go to these ayahuasca. Alex will say this. When you come away from these ayahuasca retreats, the jungle looms heavily. You feel it will impact you. You'll feel more closer, more connected to nature. And I think that connection to nature is important, because that will it will put us more in tune with what I call natural intelligence.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some of my favorite experiences in the jungle is, usually the shaman is singing, but my favorite instances are when the shaman stops singing and just the natural ambience of the jungle noise filters in, and it just seeps into your being, and you become much more, you don't so much associate just with the consciousness inside your body, but it gets extended out into the natural environment. You become much more connected to it and more connected to the fact that it's a part of you, like the breath you're taking in is what sustains your life. You're so very connected to that world. And when you come to realize that, the idea of putting harm towards the biosphere becomes something that you're putting harm towards yourself, because you associate more with that than just yourself. So
is that something that's hung with you, Alex? Or, well, when's the last ayahuasca experience you had?
The last ayahuasca experience was a few months ago, actually. Okay. That wasn't a particularly good experience. I had some local shaman come over to give ayahuasca to my mother, who was going through cancer, and it was a very difficult ceremony, but also very amazing. I had experiences. There was me and two other shamanic workers, and there came a point in the ceremony where we all just stood to attention suddenly, and we could all feel somehow that the ayahuasca was consciously about to try and make an attempt to get the cancer out. And my mother said she could feel all the electrons on her body kind of vibrating and all this sort of thing. So that was it was a very different ceremony. So in terms of like being connected to nature, there wasn't really any of that. But we did with Simon go for a trek in nature recently with the psilocybin.
Was that the end of October, wasn't it?
That was actually after the ayahuasca. So that was actually the last psychedelic experience. And it definitely helps reinforce these ideas. Some of that experience does definitely stay with you, but you kind of need to be reaffirmed every so often, because, when you come back into modern culture, that connection just kind of loses it a bit, because you get caught up in the
Western world, right?
Yeah, you really do. You really do.
Yeah,
Jason, you familiar with David Attenborough?
The name does sound familiar.
Well, he's very famous in the UK. He's very famous in the UK because he's a naturalist. He makes all these amazing. He's been making documentaries about life on Earth, for decades and decades. He's very famous. He's the most famous presenter, natural history presenter in the UK. But he's expressed one of the things that worries him the most is our disconnection from nature. That's the thing. I mean, he's in his 80s now. He's a Sir Richard, Sir David Attenborough.
Oh, okay. I just googled him, and yes, I have seen him on television, and I've heard him on.
So when he's asked about what concerns him most about the world, he always says it's particularly the modern generation. You know, kids growing up today on, stuck on their phones and their iPads and all this kind of thing, is our disconnect from nature. And there's even a word for it. It's called nature deficit disorder.
Right, I've heard that before.
It might sound a bit amusing, but I think it really, our ancestors would certainly say we suffer from this nature deficit disorder. And it is getting back again to why I think psilocybin and ayahuasca are so important, and why I go on and on, I bang on and on about psilocybin, is I think one of its most important virtues or its potentials is to bring us closer to nature again. It's in such an overwhelming way that it will never leave you. And the amount of times I've been out with Alex on a few occasions, out in Snowdonia in the Lake District at night under the stars in a oak forest under the influence of locally gathered mushrooms, I've felt such spiritual bliss at being alive and part of this fantastic biosphere, or spaceship Earth, as Buckminster Fuller called it. I just had the urge to want to share that with everyone. It's just, and so these revitalization centers we were mentioning earlier on, they'd have to have some sort of grounds outside. And I would, if I was in charge of setting one of these centers up, I'd make sure that it had extensive grounds and people could, I don't know, maybe have a campfire out there or something, and you've got some trees and, it can, psilocybin can help reconnect you to this larger living, flowing wisdom that is life on Earth. And I think that's very, very important at this juncture in time, because climate change is really hitting hard. In the UK now, we're suffering storms and floods and unprecedented, really.
Yeah, we're in the coldest winter on record here in Detroit.
It's going to keep getting worse, I think. It sounds horrible to say that.
Yeah, I think Wales is going to fall into the sea soon. It's getting that bad over there.
So it's very important that we reconnect with the rest of the web of life and view the web of life in a different way. And psilocybin mushrooms and ayahuasca can help forge that new healthy connection.
Going back to nature deficit disorder, I have 2 children, and I have to raise them in this Western society, and I have a decision to make. At any point in my life, I can say, well, fuck the Western world, right? I'm gonna sell my house, I'm gonna sell my cars, and I'm gonna move to a hippie commune or a plot of land, and we're gonna live off the land, right? Well, that's not really something that is on the list of things to do for my wife and kids. They love their iPods, they love their phone, they love the computer, they love technology, and I get it, I do too. But I do believe that there has to be a balance there. That's why I try and get out, have a walk. I like to go up north and camp. I just got back from a winter camping trip. That was great. The kids weren't on that one, but I try and show them, look, you got to get out, you got to move the body, you got to be around the outside. You can't just stay inside all day long. And when I was a kid, man, I was out all day, every day. Even in the wintertime, we were doing something, and we weren't really cooped up in the house like most kids are today with video games and computers and such like that. But it is the world we live in. And I think that there is a balance that has to be walked between living in the commercial world of, the rat race, as they call it, and, the woods.
Yeah, climbing. They've done studies that have looked at. I'm old enough to remember that when I was a kid, it was normal to climb trees.
I used to love to. Yeah, I still like to.
But they've done studies now that most kids do not climb trees anymore. I don't know. It's probably because they're
too dangerous. Where's your helmet? Where's your arm pads?
Yeah, health and safety.
Oh man, we're nerfing the world. Joe said that before, and we talked about it with Adam Scorgi. He was on, but It does seem like when you go outside, it's dangerous out there. You know, we're in the house, we're safe. This is our area. This is our nest that we've built, and everything's safe here. And when you go outside, everything is a variable. You know, there's no sense of control outside. And I like to get outside of my comfort zone. It seems like life is much fuller and more rich when you do things and get out of the house. Like whatever you're doing, you go to a museum or go take a walk or try whatever you're going to do, try something different just to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and try not to have so much control over things in your life.
Yeah, and also with the trees, that kids don't climb trees anymore. There was another study done that most people don't, or there was a significant amount of people in the West have never seen the Milky Way. You know, you think
that's insane.
Imagine living and dying without ever beholding the Milky Way. It's another disconnect from the larger picture.
Yeah, it's harder, especially in these cities that have all this ambient light during the nighttime.
Light pollution. Yeah,
the light pollution is a real problem. I mean, I have to drive probably 3 hours away from my house to really see the stars brilliantly. And even when I would drive there, and when I was a kid, I remember seeing many more stars than I do now. But you know, there is something to be said about that. You know, I remember there was a blackout in the U.S. This is probably at least 10 years ago. And the
in New York,
was out
right?
for 3 days. Yeah, New York, the whole eastern seaboard, all Michigan was out. And like half the United States lost its power, basically. And people were calling 911 because stars were so bright they thought they were seeing intelligent, like alien ships up there. And there was a no-fly zone. You know, all kinds of shit was going on. I think at that time, and it was just incredible that people had no idea what was up there. You know, look up, people. It's amazing out there. There's so much vastness out there. It'll blow your fucking head. You know.
Yeah, I've encountered many people, especially when I worked in Chinese cities, people who had never even left the city in their entire life. So they would have no concept about stars or any of these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, just looking at the stars under the effects of psilocybin, it's still, you know, over all the inner journey, still the most profound thing.
Well, yeah. So, Jason, what Alex and I do every year, we go, particularly in the autumn, we go out to the Welsh wilderness or to the Lake District, these last remaining wilderness areas in the UK. And we normally do like a 4 or 5 day trek out there, you know, camped in the middle of the forest or whatever in the mountains. And the mushroom grows out there. And it's the most, I always tell people, it's the stuff of science fiction that you can be in the most amazing wild area where because wilderness has a real quality to it. You know, you have to be in wilderness to really appreciate it. It's so different from urban living, you know, because I live in London, so it's amazing. The contrast is extraordinary. And this mushroom grows out there and it's all free. You know, you pick this mushroom, you take it around a fire at night, and you're under the Milky Way, and you know, and you've got stars twinkling between the branches of oak trees, and it's phenomenal. It's absolutely amazing. So when you have these blissful, astonishing biospherical experiences and you feel connected to this larger picture, the bigger universe, there's an obligation there to try and convey that vision or that experience or that amazing state of mind, that spiritual quality. The onus is on you to try and help convey that to other people. So I think that's what Alex has been inspired by, that kind of thing, and I have as well. So
sounds like I need to get my passport in order, guys.
That sounds
awesome.
What's the location you took the ayahuasca in? What kind of environment was it?
It was in a home. It was in a nice home. It was in a furnished basement or a finished basement. There was no furniture down there. It was nice padded carpet, but I brought in sleeping bags and, you know, comfy clothes and things like that, and I had my bucket next to me, my trusty bucket, and so we took it there. So I'm really curious to see the difference between. I mean, I don't really have the funds to shoot off to Peru and do an ayahuasca retreat for a week or two, which I would love to do, but I took what I could get, and It was an incredible experience. I would love to see the difference, like I said, between taking it in the natural environment and taking it how I did. But I know that the brew actually was shipped over from Peru, I believe.
I think the majority of it will.
Yeah.
Shaman you encounter in the West still, yeah.
Yeah, because I've heard that there's a tremendous amount of plant material that's required, for boiling down on days. And, I think it's probably much more efficient to ship the liquid than it would be to ship all the plant matter and boil it down in your house.
Yeah,
over a
I
period
think
of
it
days.
doesn't keep too well as well if you're using very old materials that have been cut down for a while. So, yeah.
Well, what do you guys got on your plate in the future here?
Well, getting back to natural intelligence. I'm going to be doing the world's first talk about the natural intelligence paradigm in I think on May the 1st or May the 2nd in Wisconsin, actually in the USA.
I was just there.
There's a 2-day bioethics forum there. They have every year, and the forum this year is going to be. I think the title of the forum is 3.8 billion years of wisdom, the genius of life. So it's right up my street. I actually helped the organisers with suggestions on who they should get to speak. But they invited me to speak there, so I'm going to be doing a talk, a 1-hour presentation on the natural intelligence paradigm, because it's my bag.
Right. What city is this in Wisconsin? Do you know? Do you know what city it is in Wisconsin?
Madison, I think.
Okay. Very cool. Hey, Alex, how about you? What do you got coming up?
Well, I've now got a publisher interested in this ayahuasca graphic novel. It seems I've been working on forever now, and I know Simon keeps moaning that I haven't finished it yet, but I just keep being sidetracked by other projects. And I really got engaged in all the filming stuff that seemed to be a small obsession of mine for a while. But now I'm sort of going back to my roots with my artwork, and now that a publisher's interested in this ayahuasca graphic novel, which is essentially, scene by scene depictions of what I've been through with my ayahuasca journeys. And so I'll be working on that for the large part of this year. I hopefully can try and get the first part of that out towards the end of this year, maybe early next year. So that's going to be a big focus for me now.
Very good, very good.
And I should say that the new book I got coming out in 1 year's time, The Magic Mushroom Explorer, there's a chapter in there which mentions Alex. It's about the experience. We took ayahuasca in the Welsh forest, and there's a whole chapter on that evening in this new book. So that's quite an interesting thing.
I'm very curious to read it.
And that's actually how my graphic novel starts from that instance. And then it
cool.
comes back in time to see how it began. So
Cool.
See how everything's connected there.
Yeah,
it's a bit
absolutely.
of a crossover.
You can cross-reference all these future books. Although I don't call Alex by his name, he's known as the artist in the.
Well, if they read my book, they'll figure that out pretty easily, I think. But
good deal. Alex, where can people find you? You're still at Warty Works, I'm sure, right? You got your information on the website, but why don't you give it out?
It's wardyworks.co.uk, so that's WARDYWORKS.co.uk.
And then you're on Twitter and Facebook as well?
Yeah, but if you go to that website, it's all interlinked. So
Gotcha. Yeah, that's how we are as well. Simon, where can people find you and your material?
Well, I've got a website, simongpowell.com. Everything's on there.
Excellent.
It's not a very flash website, but there's a link to loads of videos and stuff on there. I've got lots of videos and music videos and films and all that kind of stuff. simongpowell.com.
Yeah, information is key.
Yeah.
Very cool, guys. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for both being on. Appreciate you being back, Alex and Simon. Thanks for making your debut appearance.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks.
All right. Well, if you guys want to see more about the Intellectual Gentlemen's Club, just go to intellectualgentlemansclub.com. You can find all our links from there as well. Our intro music is brought to you by Secrets. Our exit music today is brought to you by Simon G. Powell and his track, The Good Trip. So enjoy, please. Shares, likes, retweets are very helpful. It helps get the word out, subscriptions, and ratings on iTunes. All that stuff really helps us get it out there. So, thanks again, guys. Hang loose out there.
It's the power to arouse curiosity.
Oh,
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good.
So what do you say?
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good.
That's all. That's all it very good.
So what do you say?
Something for your mind, your body, and your soul.
It's a turning on of the body to the body.
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good.
That's all. That's all it very good.
So what do you say?
Purpose, the goal which one acts on. A journey of force, hot like the sun and wet like the rain.
It's a turning on of the body to the body.
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good.
That's all. That's all it very good.
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good.
That's all. That's all it very good.
So what do you say?
Seriously? You're still listening? Well, why don't you download all the podcasts? www.intellectualgentlemensclub.com, iTunes, Stitcher, the whole works. Go get the rest of them. Later.
I never said I was a gentleman, motherfuckers.